from Temple, esteemed and much published scholar, and the Mellon Professor in the Humanities, and the founding director of the Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research. He has been described in the media as the high priest of wokeness. 3 years ago, at 31, Politico magazine invited Dr. Kendi to offer his take on how to fix American politics. Here's the Kendi reply. He proposed an anti-racist constitutional amendment that would make unconstitutional racial inequity and racist ideas by public officials. It would establish and permanently fund a federal Department of Anti-Racism comprised of formally trained experts on racism and no political appointees. The department would be responsible for pre-clearing all local, state, and federal public policies to ensure they won't yield racial inequity, monitor those policies, investigate private racist policies when racial inequity surfaces, and monitor public officials for expressions of racist ideas. The department would be empowered with disciplinary tools to wield over and against policymakers and public officials who do not voluntarily change their racist policy and ideas. I certainly hold no brief for racism, as my lifelong black friend, Marine veteran, and college roommate from 1957, Frederick Langston Meacham, would readily testify. But if supporting the Kendi Amendment is required proof of my anti-racism, count me out. This is John McClory. Thanks for listening.
New, get any CDC recommended vaccination from your kidney pharmacist. I heard kidney drugs can back the fam.
You bet we can. HPV? Yes, sirree.
Measles, mumps, and rubella?
Don't forget the varicella.
Meningitis?
And hepatitis.
Tdap?
It's on tap.
COVID, pneumonia, but what about shingles?
That's also one of our singles.
And do you still do flu?
You know it's true. Vax the fam.
You bet we can. Kidney drugs.
The Brady Farkas Show is produced and funded by WDEV and the Radio Vermont Group. We welcome listener feedback. Email your comments to wdev@radiovermont.com.
The teams you care about.
When you think about the Patriots' needs this offseason, look for one trait: explosiveness.
The stories that matter to you.
I'm not convinced that Ben Shungu, that he's not the League Player of the Year.
This is your home for New England sports.
Bobby Dahlbeck playing third base this year? Now that is interesting.
This is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
What's up, everybody? Brady Farkas Show live at it again here on a Wednesday on WDEV AM and FM and WDEVradio.com. We're up until 6:45 today. Then it is high school basketball. Boys playoffs. Playdowns continue. Brent Curtis is on the call. Missisquoi and Montpelier will be in that one. 6:45 pregame, 7 o'clock tip-off. Today's show is entirely dedicated to baseball, and I'm going to put some of my final thoughts on the lockout. I don't know when the next time we're really going to be able to talk about baseball is. So today is, kind of the last time that I know we're going to be able to have a whole show dedicated to baseball. Buster Olney is going to join me at 5:45. He usually joins us on Thursday. He's with us today as a special occasion. Tom Caron, Red Sox and Bruins insider, I spoke to him already today. That interview is already posted on our podcast channel, so you can find it there. We'll play some of that back in this show. I also talked a lot about the NFL Combine with Freddie Coleman of ESPN Radio. We're going to use a lot of that tomorrow. So we got 2 interviews already in the can today with Freddie and TC, and Buster will be with us live here in about 15 minutes. You can get in on the Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line. That's 802-585-3026. It's your locally owned Napa stores in Waterbury and Morrisville. You can also comment on all of our live video streams, YouTube Live, Facebook Live as well. YouTube Live and Facebook Live as well. So, again, get in however you want to get in. Just get in, and let's get to it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And here we go.
The opening thoughts on the Brady Farkas Show are brought to you by Sticks and Stuff and Swanton Lumber, Vermont's most complete locally owned home center with locations in Enosburg, Derby, Middlesex, St. Albans, and at Swanton Lumber, online at sticksandstuff.com. I want to clear one thing up before I really get into the opening thoughts and before I get into baseball. And I'm only going to say this because it's actually happened to me twice today. I had one person text me and try to give a guest for Vermont Viewpoint. And I had one person text me and tell me that they didn't like something they heard on the station that wasn't said by me. So I'll just say this, the people who are texting in, very, very nice people. Some of them have interacted with this show before. The text line is only for the Brady Farkas show. The text line is not a station-run text line. It's a number specifically run by me for this show. So if you send this number, 585-3026, if you send it a text, I'm going to be the only one that sees it. Now, I can pass your message along if you have a question, comment, or concern. And the person who wants to give a guest to Rick's show, of course, I will pass that along. But I just want people to know that if you're looking for somebody else to see your message, then I'm going to be the only one that does at this number because it's specifically run off of some accounts that I run. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Again, I don't mind people getting in, but if you tell me you don't like something that somebody else said on the station, it wasn't said by me and it wasn't said on this show. So there you go. Brady Farkas show. Back at it here on DEV. I think Rob Manfred is getting too much blame. I think that's an unpopular opinion. I don't think a lot of people are saying that, but I think it's the truth. I think Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball commissioner, is getting too much blame. The most unpopular person in this entire saga has been Rob Manfred, and I don't think that it's all completely warranted. I'm not saying that Rob Manfred is a good guy in all of this, but he's not the biggest enemy of the fans either. I see players saying that Rob Manfred's got to go. I see players juvenilely calling him man clown on social media. I see fans saying that he needs to be fired. And I simply think that the anger here by fans and players alike, I think that it's misguided. Let's understand this. Rob Manfred is the commissioner of baseball. The commissioner of baseball is hired by and works for the owners of Major League Baseball. He carries water for them. Rob Manfred's an easy target because he's the guy who's front-facing. But remember, all he really is just a messenger. He's really just a messenger. Rob Manfred, he didn't come up with the proposals that the players didn't like. He didn't come up with the full mindset that the players didn't like. He hasn't been nip-tucking the players' money or nip-tucking the players on this or that for the last several years. Look, again, he's not innocent. He's not absolved of blame. But he's not the guy who deserves all of your venom. The guy who deserves all of your venom, the people that deserve all of your venom, the collective that deserve all of your venom, the owners should be the recipients of that. Maybe Rob Manfred could have applied a little more pressure. Maybe he could have been a little better in the room with his constituents. Maybe. That's why I'm saying he's not blameless, but he is not the guy who deserves to bear the brunt of this. And when I spoke to Freddie Coleman of ESPN Radio earlier, he agreed with me.
Well, it's not his fault because he's a mouthpiece for the owners, and he's going to do what the owners tell him to do because he knows exactly what this job entails. When you become a commissioner of a professional sports league, you know that you're speaking for the owners because they're the ones that put you in place.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that long before I spoke to Freddie this afternoon. He confirmed it. I'm going to ask Buster Olney about it to get a third opinion on it when he joins me here in about 10 minutes. Everybody's mad at Rob Manfred. I got Virginia in Starksboro making a crude comment on the text line about Rob Manfred. It's not all his fault. It's some of his fault. He's a part of the group who has fault, and he probably could have been better in multiple different turns. But it is not all his fault. He is a mouthpiece, as Freddie said. He is a messenger. Virginia says he gets paid to be a whipping post. Of course it's not his fault. It's not. It's not all his fault. So when I see Marcus Stroman call him man clown, I roll my eyes and say, what are you doing? Be mad at the owners that you play for. Be mad at them. They are the ones who created this. Think about this, and this is an extreme example, but I think it's going to paint the picture. When you go to a store and the person who rings you out, the cashier, is some 16-year-old from your local high school, and they tell you they can't do something because it's store policy, do you really want to yell at them? Or do you really want to yell at the manager? Do you really want to yell at the store owner for having that policy? When you yell at the 16-year-old cashier, you are nothing more than a jerk who's looking for a fight. The 16-year-old cashier didn't make the rule. He or she is charged with enforcing the rule, and they might not even know why the rule exists. They just have to say it's company policy. Now, Rob Manfred's not as powerless as the 16-year-old cashier. I get that. But it's the same principle. Everybody who's yelling today at Rob Manfred is failing to realize that the owners who he works for are the ones telling him to say these things. The bad speech that Rob Manfred made yesterday that everybody was crucifying on social media, the owners put out all of those talking points for him. He is the messenger. He might not have helped enough to avert this. He's certainly not the sole reason, though, that it all happened. Players calling him names, fans calling him names, that's just missing the point. The owners are the bad guys. Your owner and my owner, they're the bad guys. John Henry's in that group. Hal Steinbrenner is in that group. The Ricketts family with the Cubs. It doesn't matter who you are. The owners are the bad guys. Rob Manfred is part of the owners, so he's in there too, but he's not the only person here. He's the fall guy, but he's not the only person here who is at fault. I see another text. John Henry might be the biggest loser in the world. I'm mad at John Henry. In my mind, John Henry should have done something. As one of the most powerful owners in the sport, he had the power, or he had the voice to say something that people would listen to, and he chose not to. Do you think in the NFL, if Robert Kraft said something, people would listen? If Jerry Jones said something, people would listen. John Henry, if he talked, people would listen, and he chose to say nothing. He certainly said nothing publicly. He didn't even show up in Florida at the meetings, and if he was there virtually, we didn't hear about it. John Henry could have done more. John Henry should have done more. And John Henry is as culpable as all the other owners, too. It's ridiculous that we're in this situation. John Henry deserves more of Red Sox Nation's collective anger than Rob Manfred does. I mean, I got to say, I saw this tweet from Bernie Sanders earlier, and I know I'm not a political guy, and this isn't a political show, and half of you love Bernie, and the other half are going to roll your eyes and say that he's some left-wing nut job or something. But his tweet here was very applicable. The 30 Major League Baseball owners are worth over $100 billion. The value of their teams increased by more than $41 billion since they bought them. Don't let the greed of baseball owners take away our national pastime. I don't care what your belief is on Bernie. It doesn't really matter to me. That is a pretty damning statistic, though. The owners' collective value has gone up by $41 billion. And the owners are trying to nickel and dime every penny that they can here. That is why we are in the problem. The owners are the problem. Rob Manfred is just the guy who speaks for the problem. He's not solely the problem himself. I got friends who I love. My best friends are calling for Rob Manfred's job. Like, you might not like Rob Manfred, but whoever would come in next also works for the owners. I don't know how Adam Silver has become relatively popular, but usually being the commissioner is a thankless job. People hate Gary Bettman, people hate Roger Goodell, and people hate Rob Manfred. You know what they all have in common? They all work for the owners. How Adam Silver has waved the magic fairy dust and gotten people to like him, I'd like to know his secret. But being the commissioner is a pretty thankless job. 802-585-3026, Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line. We also see messages here on the Facebook Live channel. Joe says, disagree, Brady. Manfred is the whole problem. He got exactly what he wanted. I mean, come on. He was smiling when he said the first 2 weeks were going to be canceled, or first two series were going to be canceled. Can't blame Manfred Frid, reading it wrong. But at the same time, you can't be smiling at a press conference addressing the state of baseball. Look, I would agree. I mean, Rob Manfred smiling is not a great look. But again, he didn't create the problem. The people he worked for created the problem. I'm going to ask Buster Olney that question. I don't think Rob Manfred deserves all the venom. Freddie Coleman doesn't think he's deserves the sole brunt here of everyone's anger. What does Buster Olney think? He's going to join us next right here on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV.
Elmore Mountain Farm is a farm-based handcrafter of natural body care products located in northern Vermont. All of their products are made from the finest natural ingredients and pure essential oils. They work to bring you high-quality products that make you feel good and put a smile on your face. See their products like Elmore Mountain Soap and Lotions at the Elmore store or visit their website at elmoremountainfarm.com. Elmore Mountain Farm. Call 802-888-8585.
Today on Hey Culligan, sustainability and better water. Here's Sam.
Hey Culligan, I'm really into sustainability. My clothes, my utensils, my food. But how do I get more sustainability from my water?
Super question, Sam, and the answer is an always-on drinking water system from Culligan, which helps eliminate the equivalent of 15 billion single-use plastic bottles a year.
Whoa, that's a ton of sustainability.
416,000 tons, Sam, and we're already on the way. Let us help you out with a free in-home water test with the local Culligan water expert at Culligan.com.
You could save big when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, but when we just come out and say it, it feels like it falls a bit flat. So we're going to tap into human emotion, first with some music. Then in a serious tone, I'll say, save big when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive. And even though it was about saving money with Progressive, we'll fade out the music so you know it was poignant. Wow, powerful stuff. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.
Price drop on fun and fitness deals on the WDEV Trading Post online marketplace. Get in shape with a 1-year membership to the Swimming Hole in Stowe. Normally $850, now just $350. That's less than $1 a day. A Twin City Family Fun Center $50 gift card is half priced at $25. And a 1-year individual membership to Modio Rec and Randolph is just $150. Check out all the deals on our website at WDEVradio.com.
Think you know sports better than Brady does? Text in with your thoughts at 802-585-3026.
All the insight into everything going on in baseball. It's time for our weekly conversation with ESPN baseball insider and Vermont native, Buster Olney.
I'm just about ready to bet the family farm in Vermont.
On the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Welcome back in, Brady Farkas Show right here on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. Continuing our conversation on the Major League Baseball lockout, which is ongoing. We know the first 2 series of the season have been canceled, and beyond that, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Joining us now a day earlier than usual is ESPN MLB insider and Randolph Center, Vermont native Buster Olney. Buster, you've been calling this for months. You've really been calling this strife for years with me. Now that the day is here, are you surprised it actually all happened like this?
Yeah. And it's funny, you were saying that. I'm like, yeah, yet I found myself at 5 o'clock yesterday listening to Rob Manfred announce the cancellation of those first 2 series and just thinking of one phrase, and that is dumb, smart people. Like, I'm sure that there are some analysts on the owner's side as they explained, what the rationale behind moving parts of their offers only incrementally and how this could make sense. And you weigh that against the risks and the numbers could add up. And I just was thinking, you don't get it. Like, it's a mistake made by dumb, smart people that they're looking at, they're getting caught up in the weeds and in the math. And they're not looking at the situation from 30,000 feet and understanding exactly how much damage they're going to be doing to their product.
Buster, Monday night, there was a lot of optimism. I stayed up until 1:30 in the morning, refreshing Twitter every 2 seconds. I went to bed with a lot of optimism. I thought a deal was going to get done yesterday. I told people a deal was going to get done yesterday. Was that real optimism, or was it manufactured?
Well, I think they're, based on the fact that in negotiations, both sides have to move, the fact that we saw some movement finally made you feel like, you know what, cooler heads are prevailing. The two sides might be looking at each other saying, oh, my God, the other side is serious, and they might actually play a game of chicken, and then that they would, move toward the middle. But here's what happened is that after there was movement on Monday, there was basically no movement yesterday. And when you looked at the final numbers, the competitive balance tax, and I don't want to go too deeply in the weeds because it makes people's eyes glaze over. The competitive balance tax in 2021 was $210 million. The owners wanted to move it to 220. The players wanted it higher than that. And for the next 3 years, the owners weren't going to change the numbers. I thought, as we woke up yesterday morning, okay, this is the moment that the owners will take a big stride toward the middle. And they needed to be the side that did that because they've gained so much financial ground since that wipeout labor deal in 2016, and they didn't. And it's why at the end, the players felt very cynical about the whole situation. They felt like the owners had created a false sense of optimism, knowing that they were going to, like the old Snoopy cartoons, where Charlie Brown cartoons, where Lucy pulls the football away from Charlie Brown. That's how the players felt yesterday. So I think your sense of optimism was justified. I know I had a little bit of it too. I was on SportsCenter yesterday saying the ball's kind of at the 30-yard line, moving toward the goal line. But in the end, it was 3 and out from the owners following that situation.
Buster, I see players on social media just ripping Rob Manfred, calling him names. I see high-level players doing it. I see lower-level players doing it. And I see a lot of fans ripping Rob Manfred too. Is Rob Manfred the guy to blame here, or is he just the messenger for the owners who's taking the blame?
That's exactly right, the latter, for sure. When I see that reaction to Rob on social media, I feel like saying to the players, you're kind of playing into this, playing into the owner's hands with the way that you're looking at this. It's a little bit like yelling at the airline employee at the ticket counter for a policy by, the airline.
Yeah.
Rob is though he's got that title of commissioner, I think people think of the commissioner as representing the interests of everybody. The fact is that his job is to be a lawyer for the owners, and he gets marching orders from the owners. He doesn't have power to go into the owners and say, okay, this is what our offer is going to be. He's in collaboration with Hal Steinbrenner and Dick Monfort, the Rockies owner, in previous negotiations, Artie Moreno. He has to work through with the owners on it. So I think you're right. But you know what? I mean, players need to focus their anger on somebody, I guess.
Buster Olney, ESPN MLB Insider, with us here on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. You alluded to it a moment ago. The biggest issue still appears to be that competitive balance tax. And Max Scherzer, one of the highest player reps yesterday, said that he doesn't think that the league needs the competitive balance tax anymore. Do you think there needs to be some mechanism in place to curb spending?
I do think that at some point, it's interesting because on one hand, the players talk about, having competitive integrity. Well, the fact is that if you took away some sort of curb on, and I'm not necessarily endorsing the curbs that were, suggested by the owners, but if you don't have some sort of curb in place, let's face it, it's possible that we'd wind up with a situation where the Yankees would be spending 6 or 7 times what the Tampa Bay Rays spend. That's not great for baseball, and that's not great for competitive integrity. I think there are a number of different ways to get there, and I don't really feel like they've been fully explored. And, I'm going to work on a piece for ESPN.com about this, that I do think in this time, clearly the sport's going to be shut down. I hope everybody involved in negotiations takes a hard look at, their own actions in terms of what, potentially could get better. I think it'd be great if the union were to take a look at some sort of floor and cap system to compel teams like the Orioles to spend money. Some of these tanking teams, the proposals put forth by the owners that the players have been talking about over the last week, they didn't really address tanking. And that, at the beginning of this, that was the conversation. How can we get the sport beyond tanking?
Yeah, salary cap, salary floor is something that it's easy for me as a fan to understand why it would be good all around. The players don't like a salary cap because, it limits their earning potential. Are the owners in favor of, I see why the players wouldn't like it. Are the owners would the owners be on board with something like that? I assume they wouldn't like the salary floor.
No, last summer they actually proposed some sort of a system like that. The players rejected it, based on principle, because, as you say, they feel like, well, boy, that's going to limit our necessarily, the size of the contracts we get. Look, I don't pretend to be an economic expert. I don't pretend to know the ins and outs and how the NBA works and the NFL works. But the NBA, the players have done great with that type of system. It does seem like that there's a way to do it that potentially, not only would help the competitive integrity for all 30 teams, but I think it would help the middle class of players, to keep a system. And one of the things I'm going to suggest, and I love Max Scherzer, I think he's a great person, but I do think it'd be worth Max asking himself the question, is this system good? Yes, he's getting, $43 million a year, $1.5 million a start. That's more money than most of the players in his union are making in a single year. Is that necessarily the best possible system? Might work for Max Scherzer, might work for the top 2%, but is that good for the whole rank and file? Is that the best system for the whole rank and file? I don't know if that is.
Buster Olney, ESPN MLB Insider, with us here talking about the continuation of the MLB lockout on the Brady Farkas Show. Buster, usually with us on Thursday, but today he's with us here on an urgent special edition Buster Olney Wednesday. I don't know when we're going to play again, but I also, I feel like, I don't even know how to ask this question. If we lop off 60 games, I feel like most fans ultimately aren't going to care. Not because they don't like baseball, but because a lot of fans think the season is too long anyways. Do you think people would actually be happy if they only played 100 games?
There might be a few fans, and there's no doubt. I mean, we saw in the 2020 COVID season that there is, a greater urgency if you have a season of 60 games or 100 games. But I think there are a lot of fans who are going to walk away. And I, much older than you are, and I can remember the spring of '95 when I covered the Orioles for the Baltimore Sun, going to games, after opening day in Kansas City and seeing all the empty seats, in town after town after town, in ballpark after ballpark after ballpark, where there were just so many fans angry about the strike. It ended that strike, that work stoppage, ended baseball in Montreal effectively. That franchise never recovered. It took the Toronto Blue Jays 20 years to recover. I think in this case, franchises like the Guardians in Cleveland, the Detroit, Milwaukee, I think the small market, mid-market teams are going to be hit huge by this shutdown. To the degree that I've wondered if some of the small market owners will call off the dogs at some point and say, you know what, this is not good. Because we know, the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Dodgers, when baseball returns, people will go back to Fenway Park. Maybe the attendance will be down a little bit, but I think in some of the other less affluent areas where their teams, I think it could have an enormous impact.
Well, Buster, I'll get you out of here on this. Andrew Brandt, sports business expert, done a lot of stuff I've seen over the NFL the last several years. He said he thinks that cooler heads will prevail here. He thinks the deal gets done by March 15th. Do you see any realistic way that's plausible?
And I think he does a great job. I think he's applying normal logic. Yeah. I've told you, I feel like the sport is just swept up so much on management side in such a spirit of incrementalism. They're focused on every digit and they're not looking at the big picture. To apply a cooler heads prevail mentality would mean that, influential forces on the ownership side would step in. And I've wondered, in 1995, Peter Angelos, the owner of the Orioles, refused to go along with the replacement player gambit that the owners tried, and it kind of exposed some cracks. I wonder if there's going to be a big market owner, Hal Steinbrenner, John Henry, Mark Walters as the Dodgers, somebody stepping forward and saying, this is insanity. What are we doing here? Shutting down the sport. This is not good for the product. Some voice like that needs to step forward.
Definitely not a good day for baseball. Hopefully there are better days ahead, but we don't know when those better days are coming. Buster Olney, ESPN MLB Insider. Buster, we'll talk to you again next Thursday. Maybe there will be some better news to report, but if not, we can talk about Derek Jeter stepping down and all sorts of other off-topic things I wanted to ask you about. So we'll talk to you in 8 days no matter what.
That sounds great, Brady.
Absolutely. Sounds great as well. Buster Olney traveling tomorrow, so he joined us today. Tom Caron, Red Sox and Bruins Insider at Nesson. We spoke to him also today. You'll hear some of that in the next hour, but the full interview with TC is available on the show's podcast channel. Frank says it's a sad day when you can't start your season day one. And that's really the only reaction to have. We can talk about all the semantics and all the in the weed stuff and all the money stuff and all the labor stuff. At the end of the day, it's just sad. It's just sad that we're supposed to be talking about baseball and we're not going to. Look, we have plenty of things to talk about. We're going to talk Patriots Combine and free agency is going to start, and the draft and March Madness at UVM. We got Celtics and Bruins, and the NHL trade deadline is March 21st. We got all kinds of stuff to talk about. Baseball should be at the forefront right now at this time of year, and it's not. And that is just sad. The Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line is open, 802-585-3026. Thanks to Buster for joining us. A ton of interesting stuff there that Buster said. And he agreed with me on Rob Manfred, by the way. Now, he used a different analogy, but really the same thing. He used the flight attendant for an airline policy analogy. I use, the 16-year-old worker at the retail cashier, but Buster largely in agreement with me. On the other side of the 6 o'clock hour, I want to have the crew here cut up some of that Buster interview so we can talk about the idea of a salary cap and a salary floor. What we'll do is we'll step aside, we'll get a national news update from CBS, and then I'll ask this question. It looks like whenever baseball starts again, there's going to be 12 teams in the postseason. I know my answer. Are you okay with that? That's coming up next right here on WDEV AM and FM.
This is WDEV, Vermont's news station, owned and operated by the Radio Vermont Group. From the top of Sugarbush, 96.1 FM, WDEV Warren and Waitsfield, 96.5 W243 Barrie, 98.3 W252 CU Montpelier, along with our founding station, AM 550 WDEV Waterbury Montpelier, streaming at WDEVradio.com. 90 years of serving Vermont, the friendly pioneer, WDEV.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Dell Small Business.
I'm Matt Piper in New York. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says there's a reason that 40-mile-long Russian convoy toward Kyiv has not reached the capital city yet.
The northern push by the Russians down towards the south, towards Kyiv, remains stalled. They haven't, from our best estimates, have not made any appreciable progress, geographically speaking, in the last 24 to 36 hours.
His words come on this as seventh day of Russia's invasion, and word from that country's news agency said it expects Ukrainian officials to arrive in Belarus for the next round of peace talks tomorrow morning. CBS News military consultant Jeff McCausland on Russia's alleged use of so-called vacuum bombs.
Such weapons can have the explosive power of a low-yield nuclear weapon without the associated radiation. Such weapons can collapse buildings. The Russians used them in Syria against Aleppo.
CBS's Steve Futterman is still talking to refugees along the Ukraine-Poland border.
She is from Ukraine, has been studying here in Poland. Now she is going back to rescue her
dog and cat. They're my children, so I can't just leave them there.
The cat's named Cactus, the dog is named Eclipse. She realizes there could be danger, but is hopeful since where she lives
hasn't been under attack yet, like nothing exploded or something.
We saw her at the train station.
Now I'm just waiting for my train to leave.
She hopes to do all this in 24 hours. Steve Futterman, CBS News, Medica, Poland.
On the heels of his State of the Union address last night, President Biden took a trip to Superior, Wisconsin today to push his infrastructure plan and domestic agenda.
Don't tell me we can't be a manufacturing center again. We can. We have to keep this story going.
A Florida man's being questioned in New York City over a string of weekend attacks against Asian people. New York Congresswoman Grace Meng.
Our community is mentally and physically exhausted from being forced to endure this ongoing violence.
Florida's governor versus some high school students over masks.
The 6 students were to be his backdrop for a news conference at the University of South Florida.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
3 students did take them off. Hillsborough County, where the school is located, has the highest daily COVID case average in the state. DeSantis has long opposed masks and mandates, saying they're not effective. Infectious disease experts tend to disagree. Peter King, CBS News, Orlando.
The Dow today gained 596. The Nasdaq was up 220. S&P gaining 80. This is CBS News.
Dell Technologies advisors are here with the right Windows PC and tech solutions so you can stop at nothing for your customers. Call an advisor today at 877-ASK-DELL. A start to a simpler experience with Windows 11 Pro.
Serving part-time in the Army National Guard has led to a lot of firsts for me. It paid for me to be the first person in my family to go to school. That education got me to the first day at my dream job, which I can still hold while I serve part-time. That job and the home loan benefits I got from the Army National Guard helped me buy my first house. I also know that I will be one of the first to respond if my community ever needs me.
Sponsored by the Vermont Army National Guard. Aired by the Vermont Association of Broadcasters and this station.
We're out of the brand name, but we do have the generic version of that.
Serene's Pharmacy can't keep up with allergy season.
Who's next in line?
They need certified technicians to alleviate the headache.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry for the wait. We'll have your prescription filled soon. I need some help.
Indeed can help them hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Instant Match instantly connects you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Now an important message from Exergen. A critical new FDA study proves that the widely used non-contact thermometers are not accurate and have high probabilities for false negative readings. New COVID strands are on the rise, and non-contact manufacturers are being irresponsible at a time when accuracy matters most. Accurate temperature measurements are essential. Don't wait. Switch to Exergen because they are accurate and backed by over 100 clinical studies. Be sure, be accurate with Exergen. Learn more at Exergen.com.
Just because you're away from your radio or out of our broadcast range doesn't mean you have to miss out. Listen live on the WDEV stream, brought to you by AARP Vermont. WDEV's morning, midday, and afternoon news services, Vermont Viewpoint, and the Brady Farkas Show can all be found on the WDEV stream at WDEVradio.com. Brought to you by AARP Vermont, working to bring down the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans. AARP.org/VT.
Your chance to be part of the show is on the text line at 802-585-3026.
Now it's back to the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Welcome back in, Brady Farkas Show right here on WDEV AM and FM and WDEVradio.com. Thanks to Buster Olney of ESPN for joining us today. Nick over in Plainfield just messaged me on the Napa-Morrisville, Napa-Waterbury text line and says, show has been awesome today. First time in a while I've turned on sports radio and actually learned something. And my first response to that is thank you. My second response is you probably learned more from Buster than you learned from me, so I'll take that as a compliment of him. And third, if this is the first time you've turned on sports radio and listened to some and actually learned something, how often are you listening to our show? Are you saying our show is not able to teach any other day, only today? I need some more clarification on that. So that's Nick over in Plainfield. We get a message on the text line also from an unnamed texter who says, can major league players play in Japan? I heard a joke from Bryce Harper about joining the Giants there. That's a good question. In the Major League lockout, Major League players can play anywhere, right? As long as the lockout is going, Major League players can play anywhere. That said, some of those foreign leagues have rules as to how many Americans can actually be on the roster. I believe in Japan, you can have 4 Americans, and I believe in Korea, you can have 3. It might be reversed. It might be 3 in Korea and 4 in Japan. But nonetheless, those spots are largely already taken at this point. So the idea of Bryce Harper going to join the Tokyo Giants for a period of time, probably not likely. As great as it would be to have Bryce Harper, I don't know that those teams would cut a player who signed on for them for a year to go and play for, to go bring on Harper for 8 games or 10 games or whatever. Maybe, but it's unlikely because there are those rules there. And that's not the only place where that exists. In Canada, you have to have X number of Canadians on your CFL rosters. Like, you have to have a certain amount of Canadians there as they want to keep the sport growing on a local level. So the whole roster can't be overrun with entirely Americans on a CFL roster. So, yes, Major League players can go play somewhere. They can play in Mexico. They can play independent ball. A lot of players, I'm sure, will play in the Atlantic League if this thing really continues on. They're going to do stuff on their own. They're going to organize a players' association. I wouldn't call it game, but like a camp over in Arizona and one in Florida. So players are going to do things there. So players can go play other places. If they're Latin American, they could play in their own country if there's leagues there. But again, certain players, certain number of Americans have to be, or can only a certain number of Americans can play in Korea and in Japan. So like Bryce Harper and others might not have as easy a time of getting in there. All right, let's talk about expanded playoffs in Major League Baseball, because let's be real. Most of what the owners and the players have been and continue to argue about doesn't affect you, the fan. Luxury tax, revenue sharing, lottery draft picks, most of it doesn't affect any of you. And most of you don't really care. Most of you are like, hey, let's just get baseball played and then tell me exactly what went down. What does impact you, the fan, though, is the format of the playoffs. And that's going to change. When this deal gets signed, whenever it gets ratified, we're going to have what I believe is 12 teams in the Major League Baseball playoffs. Now there's 10. Right now there's 10. It used to be 8, right? So now there's 10, 3 division winners and 2 wild cards. We're going to get up probably to 12. It looked like that was something that the two sides had agreed upon on Monday night. So I would expect to see 12 teams in the Major League playoffs from this year on through the rest of this next collective bargaining agreement whenever it's signed. So 12 teams in the playoffs. 12 of the 30 are going to make the postseason. How do you feel about that? 802-585-3026, Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line. Also Facebook Live, YouTube Live. How do you feel about 12 of 30 teams making the postseason? I've heard from people today in multiple spots that are in favor of this, and some of them would have even been in favor of 14 teams making the playoffs. Here's Eduardo Perez, ESPN MLB analyst, former MLB player. He is on board.
I would say take the 14 teams. Take it. Why? Because it's worked with the NFL. Why are we fighting so much about 12 with 14 when the thing that makes people nervous, and always makes people nervous, if it's in sports, if it's in politics, if it's in business, whatever it may be, is change.
Okay, so he said he'd take 14, so he'd obviously definitely take 12. Tom Caron, Red Sox and Bruins insider at Nesson.
And so a 12-team playoff fine. I would make the argument a 14-team playoff would have been fine, even though everybody screams it's too many. But again, why not create more excitement, more playoff opportunities, more team in the hunt? I think that's all good for the game.
So they're both on board with 14-team playoffs. It's probably going to be 12, so we'll just go there. They're okay with 12 playoff teams also. How do you feel about it? Because for me, I don't think that this is great for baseball. And I'm surprised to hear that Eduardo Perez and Tom Caron are actually on board with this. I don't think it's great for baseball for a multitude of reasons. Now, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'll just tell you straight up now. I want baseball. I want as much baseball as possible. If 12 teams in the playoffs helps get us baseball, if that's a bargaining chip that people can get around, then I will ultimately put my tail between my legs and just go home and say, okay, this got us baseball. So I'm fine. So I'd be okay with that if that were the case. So if 12 playoff teams gets us baseball, then I'm good with it. That said, if you're asking me honestly, I don't think that this is something that's great. It's not something that I love. And here's multiple reasons why. One, this makes the playoffs go even longer. When you're adding 2 more teams per league, you're going to add a whole nother round to the playoffs. And I'm not in favor of the playoffs being longer. October baseball is great. Playoff baseball is great, but I want it to remain in October. I don't enjoy baseball being played in November. And if we're adding more teams and more playoff games and another round, that means that we're going to end up with the World Series being played in November, at least in part. And I am not for the World Series being decided in part by the weather. Baseball is a good weather game. I like to see baseball. I would rather see baseball played when it's 65 and 75 and sunny than I would when it's 32 and windy. And the more games we have in late October and the more games we have World Series in November, the weather becomes a story, and I don't want it to become a story. When they played the cold weather Super Bowl between Seattle and Denver and New York, it was 48 degrees. So what? Football is a sport that's meant to be played in the elements like that. Baseball isn't. I'm not looking forward to the idea of the playoffs going even longer and extending even deeper into October and into November and having weather be part of the storyline. 32 degrees and windy at Fenway with rain coming down. Not my idea of the World Series that I want to see. So there's reason one, I don't love 12 playoff teams. Reason two, I don't love 12 playoff teams in Major League Baseball. You'd be giving out first-round buys to teams for the first time that I can ever remember. And I don't know that that's a good thing in Major League Baseball. If 12 teams per league, if 6 teams per league, I might have said that wrong earlier, but it would be 12 total playoff teams, 6 per league. If 6 teams per league make the playoffs, here's what we're looking at. You're going to have the 2 division winners with the best record. They're going to get buys. The 1 division winner with the worst record, they're going to play in the first round against and the 3 wild card teams are going to be there. So the 2 best records are going to get buys. And I don't know that that's a good thing. We know that the first round bye helps in football. We know that physically, injury-wise, that first round bye, preparation-wise, it helps the team in football. In baseball, I don't know that it helps. Baseball is a game that requires rhythm. It requires repetition. That's why baseball is played every day. How does the team do with 5, 6, 7 days off? I don't know that that's a benefit. You work so hard all season to get the number 1 seed and to have the best record in the American League, and you go through the grind of 162 games, and man, it's a slog at times. You work that hard, and then you get to the playoffs, you get 6 days off, and you get bounced because everybody's timing is a little bit off. I don't know that that's a good thing. I don't know that that's a benefit. It helps your starting rotation get in line. That is a positive. But is it a good idea for my bats to be 5, 6, 7 days removed from game play, timing-wise? I don't know. Is it good for my bullpen, my rhythm pitchers, my momentum pitchers to have that momentum halted for a week? I don't know. Because let's just look at this logically. The regular season ends on Sunday. Then the first round of the playoffs will start on Tuesday. Probably a 3-game series, right? So Tuesday we play, Wednesday we play, Thursday we travel, Friday we play. That's game 3. Saturday we travel. Sunday the next round starts. It's been 1 week since I've played. That's really good in football. Don't know that it's good in baseball. I don't want to be the test dummy team that gets the number 1 seed and then gets off, is off for 7 days and then gets bounced in the first round. Reason number 3 why I don't love 12 playoff teams, 6 per league in Major League Baseball. It somewhat cheapens the regular season, doesn't it? Doesn't it cheapen the regular season to have almost half your league make the playoffs? Baseball plays a lot of games, 162 of them, and my goodness, those 162 games are supposed to really matter. Why? Because making the baseball postseason is supposed to be really hard. 162 games, it's a grind. It's supposed to be difficult to get to October. And now It's not going to be as hard to get to the playoffs. There will be years where teams with losing records make the Major League Baseball playoffs. And while maybe they won't go on and win the World Series, it certainly will render the regular season a little more meaningless if almost half your league can get in. Look at the NBA. How many of you really care about the NBA regular season? Not many. Why? Half the league makes the playoffs. More than half the league makes the playoffs. It's just seen as just get in and anything can happen. How many times have I heard LeBron say, it doesn't matter, just get me in the playoffs? Why can NBA players go through all these maintenance days? Why can they skip so many games? Because there's no repercussion, because I'll sit 20 games, we'll get the 4 seed instead of the 2, but we'll still get in. Do I want that in baseball? The regular season in the NBA is meaningless. The regular season in the NHL is essentially meaningless. Everybody gets in the playoffs. For college basketball, for the high major teams, the regular season is essentially meaningless. It's not about always winning, the conference. What's it about? Get the NCAA tournament and anything can happen. College basketball is all about the tournament and not about the season. Major League Baseball, the regular season is going to be a lot less important when almost everybody starts to get in. And number 4, finally, if almost everybody can make the playoffs, are teams really going to go for it? Or are teams just going to be content? What I mean is this. Last year at the trade deadline, the Boston Red Sox were a good team, right? A lot of you wanted the Red Sox to go out and make big moves at the trade deadline so they could go try to win the World Series. And you wanted them to go after Max Scherzer, and you liked when they went after Kyle Schwarber. You wanted them to go do big things. If the Boston Red Sox, if 12 teams last year got to the playoffs, the Red Sox would be pretty much cemented, wouldn't they? They would have gotten in. Maybe they don't do anything at the trade deadline. You know what? We don't want to trade that prospect. We don't want to take on that contract. We're going to get to the playoffs, and that's going to be good enough this year. Do you really want your team to do that? We're talking about more teams going for it, more teams getting competitive. If a team senses like, hey, you know what, we can win 81 games and get in, we're just going to do that. We're not going to go for it and try to go get that bat that can get us 87 wins, that can get us 90 wins. We're not going to go out and get that arm. We got enough here to get to 83, and that's going to be good enough to get in, and we're cool with that. How many teams will say, we got to the playoffs, and that's good enough, rather than going the extra mile to try to win a World Series? So that's what I'm saying. I don't know that this is great. I'm not a beggar. I want baseball. If this gets us baseball, I will put my tail between my legs and I will go for it. But I don't necessarily think that it's great for the sport. The NFL added that 7th playoff team in 2020. It's more league revenue. It's more teams in the playoffs. It's a chance to see more good players. I get that. But by and large, those playoff teams are garbage, and those playoff matchups are garbage. Has it really added anything to the league other than giving us something else to watch? No, not really. So there you go. I'll take it. I don't think it's necessarily great for Major League Baseball. All right. It is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV. We're 20 minutes away from high school basketball, remember. We've got boys playdowns today between Missisquoi and Montpelier, and that coverage begins at 6:45. Now, let's get to Who's Saying What.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. What did he say?
Mac Jones? Good Lord. Mel Kiper's got to slow down on this. Mac Jones ain't going to work, folks. It's not going to work. He's got to come to terms with it. It's not going to work.
They really said that?
Every damn thing is politics and race, and I'm losing my mind over it.
It's time for Who's Saying What on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Who's Saying What? Brought to you by Vermont Laser Wash. That's Central Vermont's home of unlimited car washes, beginning at only $20 a month. If you want one free car wash, you can just text the word Vermont to the number 30 and then 400. I told you this whole show was dedicated to baseball. I told you I really wanted to get into what Buster Olney had to say to us last hour. The biggest issue for the players and the owners appears to be exactly what we thought, right? We've gone over this, the competitive balance tax. I've bored you with what exactly that is. I'm not going to go through it step by step. The competitive balance tax, that's the biggest thing that has the owners, worried and has the players worried. That's the biggest sticking point. Well, Max Scherzer, who's high up in the Players Association, now a star pitcher for the New York Mets. Here's what he said about the competitive balance tax.
Well, we look at the competitive balance tax as a breakaway spending mechanism. That's how this thing was originally negotiated. And when you look at the history of baseball here and our labor, we're not seeing that function as breakaway spending. We're seeing it act as a salary cap, and no other way can be shown point blank and simple than the San Diego Padres having a higher payroll than the New York Yankees.
So Max Scherzer doesn't like the competitive balance tax. Now, let's say, so basically he doesn't want this competitive balance tax to exist at all. If it has to exist, the players want it to be much, much higher so it doesn't limit their earning potential, but he doesn't want it to exist at all. I've been on the players' side throughout this whole thing, but I disagree with Scherzer here. I do believe there needs to be some mechanism in place to curb spending. And Buster Olney was on with us here about an hour ago, 45 minutes ago. He agrees.
I do think that at some point, it's interesting because on one hand, the players talk about, having competitive integrity. Well, the fact is that if you took away some sort of curb on, and I'm not necessarily endorsing the curbs that were, suggested by the owners, but if you don't have some sort of curb in place, let's face it, it's possible that we'd wind up with a situation where the Yankees would be spending 6 or 7 times what the Tampa Bay Rays spent.
I don't want to live in a world where the Yankees can spend 6 or 7 times more than the Rays can spend, where the Red Sox can price everyone out of the sport. Now, look, I love the Red Sox. I want them to win the World Series for everybody here, but I don't want them to just lap the field because of spending. And I promise you, you all don't want to live in that world either. So I agree the players deserve more of this lucrative money than they're getting now percentage-wise. Younger players deserve to benefit. The owners don't deserve to hide all this extra money under the couch cushions for themselves. But I don't think that every big market team should just be free to outspend everybody around the sport with no consequences to it. So I'm not in favor of what Scherzer's saying. I do think there needs to be a mechanism in place. In this era of the competitive balance tax, in this era of non-unlimited spending, the farm system and player development has been really, really important. The Royals have won a World Series with a lot of homegrown players. The Red Sox won a World Series with a lot of homegrown players. The Giants, the same. The Rays got to one with a bunch of homegrown players. The Astros won with a bunch of homegrown players or traded for players with homegrown talent. The Nationals, all these teams won with a lot of homegrown cores. And that concept goes away if a team can just spend as much as they want and can overcome everything that the little guy is doing. So, yeah, there needs to be something. And you talk about competitive integrity. There wouldn't be the competitive integrity if the sport became just the Yankees, Red Sox, and Dodgers outspending everybody. I think it's perfectly fair, as Buster said. I know they're not going to do it, but I think it's perfectly fair to look at a salary cap and a salary floor system. The players won't love it. It will limit their ultimate high-end earnings. But I actually agree with Buster that a salary cap and a salary floor, that is great for competitive integrity, and the players can do really well in that system too. I wish they would look at it. I wish they would think about it. I don't want to limit their earnings massively, but I do think that a salary cap and salary floor would be good for the overall health of the sport. If you force the owners to spend, you will get more competitive teams. You will get more competitive teams. Listen to these numbers. The average Major League Baseball payroll last year, the league average, the median number was $132 million. That was the middle of the pack, $132 million. Only 2 of the teams that spent under the league average made the playoffs. Only 2. So clearly there is a benefit to the teams who spend money. The teams who spend money and invest, they did well. The teams that didn't do well. If there was a minimum in place, let's just call it $100 million. Okay, I'll call it $100 million. 10 teams spent under $100 million last year. 10 of them. Or no, 12 of them rather. 12 teams spent under $100 million. If you force them all, those 12, all up to $100 million, what would we get? You would create more teams getting more good, solid, veteran players. Instead of playing with the 23-year-old who's going to be a career minor leaguer at third base, now we're signing the 29-year-old free agent to a $10 million deal. And that guy is a lot better. Instead of our fifth starter being a guy who's going to get hit around and have an ERA of 9 and is going to be shuttled back and forth between Boston and Pawtucket or Boston and Worcester, now you can go get a real fifth starter who's making $7 million instead of the league minimum. I mean, this is what we're looking for. This is what a salary floor would do. You are bringing up all the teams that aren't trying. You're putting them in a position to have to spend, to have to try, to have to get better. And that would help out the veteran middle class. These players that are being, thought of as too old and not worth the money, they would have a place again. Kyle Seeger is 34 years old. He hit 30 home runs last year for the Mariners, drove in 100 runs. He retired this offseason. Why? Because the really good teams probably didn't need him because they were already really good. The really bad teams don't want him because he's too good for them and he would make too much money. So what are his options? Go be a bench player on a really good team and make $4 million? Or go be a veteran mentor on an awful team who gets underpaid too? So he retired. Guy hit 30 home runs and drove in 100 runs last year. He retired. He shouldn't have to do that. The sport should be in a better spot than that. They should treat players like that better. If you force teams to spend money, then guys like that will have a job and teams will get better. You'll create more competitive teams, more competitive balance, more money for the veteran middle class, and then you'd get more teams bidding for free agency. There'd be more general interest, more teams going for it in trades. I mean, we're talking about 12 playoff teams getting people to go for it and getting people interested. Well, if you force teams to spend money, 12 teams spent under $100 million last year. 12. The league average was 132. I think the Orioles spent like $40 million, and coincidentally, they finished in last place by about a zillion games. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of seeing that. So again, I get it. The players probably won't go for it. They want the freedom to make $40 million a year as players, but the NBA is doing well. The cream of the crop in the NBA, they're getting theirs. You know who's also getting theirs? League average players. They're getting theirs too. So there's something to it. NBA guys are doing just fine with a salary cap league. There's got to be a way to do it right. Salary cap, salary floor, I think that would help. I don't know what the number should be. The players should be able to get theirs, but a salary floor would go a long way as well. It's the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. All right. Do I have time for this on the other side of the commercial break? I believe that I do. There was one other piece of negotiation that Major League teams wanted. I'll tell you why I think you're going to hate it. I actually liked it. That's next on DEV.
For your next celebration, head to Stowe Beverage at the Gale Farm Center on the Mountain Road in Stowe. See their huge selection of beers and wines. Questions about beers? Just ask. They have the biggest microbrewery selection in Central Vermont. Find all the sales on selected wines and beers. They're a state liquor store, too, and have the biggest selection around. Stowe Beverage and State Liquor Store at the Gale Farm Center on the Mountain Road in Stowe. Ask the experts at Stowe Beverage. They're here to help.
Hi, this is Dave Catarino, and I'm a hospice and palliative registered nurse at Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice. I'm also a longtime resident of the Mad River Valley and an avid skier. I am thrilled to share that Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice is hosting the 34th annual Chez Henri Cup on Saturday, March 5th at Sugarbush Resort. An entry fee of $40 gets you access to our timed ski race plus one raffle ticket. Additional raffle tickets are $40 for one, 3 for $100, and 5 for $150. We'd like to thank our many local businesses for donating some great prizes to our raffle and to Lawson's Finest Liquids for being our event sponsor. Register to race and to buy raffle tickets online at www.cvhhh.org. We thank you for your support and we look forward to seeing you on the slopes on Saturday, March 5th.
Hello, I'm Penny Hester Ingram, a speech-language pathologist at Copley Hospital. I treat children and adults for a broad range of communication disorders, including voice issues, swallowing disorders, and problems with articulation, fluency, comprehension, and cognitive abilities. The first step in developing a treatment plan is assessing the patient's strengths and needs. I do this through an evaluation, which includes discussing the patient's history, observing the problems, and discussing the patient's goals as well as that of the family. Treatment is a step-by-step process. Families also play a vital role in treatment as they help to bring the techniques used in the clinic to the home. If you or a family member could benefit from the services offered through Copley Hospital's Speech-Language Pathology Department, call 802-888-8303
or log on to copyvt.org.
Two building science experts, over 20 years of combined experience, 1 hour per week. It's House Calls Vermont, back for a second season on WDEV.
Brought to you in part by Curtis Lumber, Shamrock Painting, Sticks and Stuff in Swanton Lumber, and Matt Clark's Northern Basement Systems.
House Calls Vermont, Saturdays at 12:30 on WDEV AM and FM, streaming at WDEVradio.com.
Make your opinion heard by texting onto the Brady Farkas Show at 802-585-3026.
This is Freddie Coleman of ESPN, and you're listening to Brady Farkas Show right here on WDEV and WDEVradio.com.
Thank you very much, Freddie. I spoke to Freddie today. That interview is available on the podcast channel. You'll hear some of it tomorrow as well. You can download the full show podcast on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Major League Baseball allegedly wanted, as part of these negotiations, to discuss a pitch clock and alterations, or a way to legislate the shift. Good. For all the things that baseball's done wrong over the last months and years, this is a good thing. Regulating the shift is something that we need. Look, I don't give two rips about the pitch clock. I was a college pitcher. I like that the game goes on my time. I'm not going to take 60 seconds between pitches, but I don't like to be forced into 15 seconds either. I won't fight you on that. I don't have the energy to do that. I don't agree with the pitch clock, but if it comes as a part of getting a way to legislate the shift, then I'd do it in a heartbeat. The shift needs to be changed. We need to see balls that should be hits actually be hits. The game of baseball needs more action. The game of baseball needs the ball put in play more. It needs more guys running around the bases. Balls that should be hits should actually go as hits. There's multiple ways to legislate this shift. I don't even know which one I like better. I just know one of the two would be okay. Make it so only two infielders can play on each side of the field. Make it so that you can play as many people on whatever side you want, but they all got to stay in the infield. But I know this. I'm tired of seeing line drives up the middle that should be right up behind second base get gobbled up by a shortstop who's standing behind second base. I'm tired of seeing line drives that should be hits into right field be gobbled up by a second baseman who's playing 48 feet on the outfield grass in right field. I'm tired of that. I want to see balls that should be hits be hits. And I know what all of you are thinking out there. All of you are getting ready to tell me, if Major League Baseball players are so good, they should just hit it where they ain't. It's not that easy. Brady, it's easy to beat the shift. Tony Gwynn used to just slap it the other way. In 1992, you probably could get away with that. If they shifted on you in 92 and the pitcher's throwing 92, yeah, you probably can just lay the head of the bat out and beat a ball to the left side. In today's baseball, when they're throwing 98 with run under your chin on the inner half, you're not just plucking the ball to left field. It's not happening. Brady, just bunt. It's easy. You should be able to bunt against the shift. 97 with movement or an 88-mile-an-hour slider bearing in on your front hip. Tough to bunt. So pitching has gotten so good that pitching has the decided advantage. Offense needs to get some of that advantage back. Regulating the shift would help do that. Balls that should be hits should be hits. In high school, when the kid's throwing 75, you can control where you hit it. 98 under your knuckles, not that easy to hit. So it's not as simple as just hit it where they ain't. You need to regulate the shift. It's hard enough to hit in baseball now, period. You can't take away even more offensive momentum. And then I always see, you should be able to play defense how you want. You can't do that in any other sport. In hockey, we have rules about how you can defend the crease. In basketball, we have defensive 3 seconds, and you can't play in the restricted area for too long. Why? Help the offense. Open up the middle of the floor. More dunks, more passing, more cutting, more action. In football, you can't play any defense. Can't touch after 5 yards. Can't bump here. Can't hold. Can't have illegal contact. Can't do this movement. Can't make that movement. Every league restricts what the defense can do to help the offense. Baseball needs it far more than the NBA does. If every other sport can restrict movement for the defense, baseball can too. We need offense back in the game. It's the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. Show is brought to you in part by Pro Driver Training. That's online at ProDriverCDL.com. It's Vermont's premier truck driver training school. Again, ProDriverCDL.com. All right, high school basketball is coming up next. Brent Curtis will be on the call. It's Missisquoi at Montpelier. Again, our coverage beginning here at 6:45, about 5.5 minutes from now. So Brent is on the call. It's a 15 seed Missisquoi against a 2 in Montpelier, looking for the upset. We're on tomorrow for a full 90 minutes. We will be on tomorrow from 5:30 until 7. Rick Pigeon is going to stop by, Fairfax, Vermont native, NASCAR pit crew member for 23 years. Rick Pigeon is going to stop by. Go download the podcast. Again, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search for the Brady Farkas Show. Thanks to Buster. Thanks to TC. Thanks to Freddie Coleman, all of which stopped by either live or on the podcast channel. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. It's WDEV.
Northfield Savings Bank is proud to sponsor WDEV at 90. Whether you're a builder,